Hey, welcome to The Complete Advisor. On today's episode, we are going to take a thrilling journey into the world of nowcasting. Imagine having the power to understand the economy and financial markets in real time. Not just the what and the numbers, but the why and what's going to be happening in the very near future. Our guests are from QuantCube Technology. They're here to unveil this groundbreaking technology. They're using a blend of AI, they're monitoring social media, they're even using satellite data to monitor shipping traffic patterns, giving an incredible insight into current economic trends. Now, this isn't just forecasting, it's nowcasting, a tool revolutionizing decision-making in finance. If you're curious how it works, if you're curious how it can change the game for financial advisors and investors, well, let's take a listen. We're going to dive right in with, we've got Long and we have Alex, and I want to introduce you guys. You are, Long, you're the CFA CEO and co-founder of QuantCube Technology, located in Paris, which is an amazing city, and you guys just flew in. The old joke is, of course, you just flew in from Paris, and boy, are my arms tired. That one does not translate across countries, apparently, but classic old joke. But so Long, welcome. Alex, welcome. Tell us a little bit about you and tell us a little bit about QuantCube. Alex, or Long, why don't you go ahead and start?
Yeah, so QuantCube has been created 10 years ago. It's about more than 100 people, what you call the data scientist. And before the creation of QuantCube, I started 25 years ago, and I was the first one to create quant investment strategies for Societe Generale in New York. So let me summarize what I have learned, in 15 years of trading. Basically, to deliver financial performance, it's always better to have access and to analyze information before everybody. And this is why we have created QuantCube, which analyze all real-time information for Nowcast, which I will explain later.
I like it. Yes. Alex, how do you fit in this picture?
So I joined the company 7 years ago, and I really see the company growing. And I really see as well the global adoption of the nowcasting. And I think also what the client likes in the nowcasting is that we can really inscribe those data in macro stories that really make sense to them. And after that, they will better understand why we are in advance compared to official data and why we can create some edge from a financial markets perspective.
Now, so going into let's define nowcasting, and it's fascinating. So I'm going to say some things that are some old Wall Street things that I don't think translate to the other side of the pond. But, when I was an advisor, you could get the Stock Market Almanac, this book that would have these different things. And there was all those old school ideas of dogs at the Dow, and they'll, find those 5, and they'll be the next year, they'll be the great one. Monitoring triple witching, watching dividends, watching these different things. And it seems so just basic. When you think about that and the data that people were looking at 100 years ago, 25 years ago, compared to now, and now we're talking about nowcasting. So go ahead and define what nowcasting is.
I mean, it's very straightforward. Nowcasting stands to forecast now. So what we currently forecast is the present, basically. So we tell you, in fact, what we estimate in real time is the current state of the economy using only real-time data too. So, I mean, we do not make forecast 1 month, 3 months from now, but we are able to tell you the current state of the economy as of today in the US, in China, all over the world, using all those new types of alternative data. This kind of alternative data, you have 4 typology of real-time alternative data. First, social media. It's social media not only in English or French, but also in Arabic, because you have 5 times more information in Arabic than in English about crude oil, for example.
That's interesting.
Yeah, of course. And energy is such a big topic. Or in Chinese about commodities. Second typology of data is satellite data. Our company has been backed by European Space Agency. We have published with the NASA as well. And we can have access to any kind of satellite data from European space satellites, but also from US satellites. So to summarize, we can see everything in real time all around the world.
It is fascinating. You know, when you say nowcasting, it seems like it would be intuitive or like, well, that kind of, you know, what's the big deal? But you know, we so often I think about the quarterly reports that I'll get that'll have, you know, the throw some names out there, you know, J.P. Morgan or Lincoln Financial Group or Wells Fargo, like they put out those big quarterly, like, hey, here's what happened and here's where we think things are going to go. But you're 100% right. You don't have that, like, what's happening right now. So with the satellite, that's interesting. So with the satellite data that you're looking at, what kind of things are you looking at?
You can see many things with the satellites. One thing is about industrial production, you know, with satellite, you know, in real time, you can see industrial production, you know, over Michigan. You can see in the industrial production over Shanghai, anywhere in the world too. And moreover, it's very comparable. And, you know, some countries do not disclose, you know, any data.
Absolutely.
So, you know, Wall Street Journal has published our data. Central banks uses our data to estimate, you know, the Russian economy using, you know, satellite data. And from there, you know exactly what happens. And you are ahead, by construction, ahead of publication of official numbers, up to 3 months ahead, but also ahead of market consensus or market publications. So, you know, it's definitely a big competitive advantage, you know, when you take, you know, financial positions.
Yeah. So Alex, talk to us a little bit about, besides satellite, what do you watch on social media? What do you all, when you're looking and analyzing, what kind of things on social media? Are you also looking at, you know, from the business side of things, minutes from corporate meetings, from the office, board of director type meetings? Those kind of things come into play?
So definitely we have done that before, but on the macro standpoint, we are more focusing on things that are related to, for instance, comments for goods, that are reviews, etc., because they are going to give us a good indication of the consumption trend. In general, we for instance, we have found out that we have a very strong correlation with the consumption discretionary and the hotel review that you can have, for instance, on the social media or on other websites. And for us, we really use it as a fundamental aspect to track the consumption in real time and to track the new trend and the thematics that are going to be in the next months the biggest trend.
Yeah. So you're really watching. You really have like your finger on the pulse of what's going on right now. How do you analyze all that data? I just heard from both of you. I just heard a ton of data. How are you digging through it, and how does AI's got to play some factor here, right?
We use intensively AI, but what is very important, we use AI as a tool. So, for example, you know, in terms of input, you have a satellite data. In terms of output, you have a time series to tell you about, you know, how much industrial production. And between, you know, the input and the output, this is AI algos, what you call the deep learning for computer vision. You know, for text, you know, you have social media. And in terms of output, you have a sentiment index, and between, you know, you have natural language process. And we are the only one to do it in multilingual, not only in English, but also European language and Korean, Japanese, etc. And our methodology is very transparent, so we are very able to tell you what drives the economic growth or the nowcast. So, for example, we track all the ships, you know, in real time, tankers. So we are able, you know, to tell you where Russian tankers are going. China, India, or, you know, from Houston also where they are going to. We get all employment data company by company. We get, you know, all, you know, hotel prices for reservation, you know, occupancy rate of hotels, restaurant. And on top of that, you have an econometric model which estimates economic growth. And this is how you estimate the economy in real time with full transparency.
How are you, let me ask you this, how do you deal with, there's just got to be so much noise. Like how do you, is it just, it comes down to, I mean, it can't all be AI, it's got to be, you know, a human making some of these decisions. How do you cut through what we would call white noise or all that extra? How do you do that?
So we have developed internally a data quality check layer to be sure that there are no duplicates, to reduce to smooth the noise, to reduce it at most, to try to adapt to correct all the noise from those bias. So we try to estimate all those bias and then we correct it. For instance, I'm going to give you an example. You have a lot of noises in the NO2 satellite data because you have meteorological impact. You also have the decarbonization trend that can affect the industrial pollution. So we need to correct those two biases. We need to correct this noise by applying some penalties to the model.
Yeah.
And so we do it in a very straightforward way. So we apply a factor and we reduce the final modeling with this factor.
So how often long are you watching the news and just laughing because they're getting it wrong? You know, they're making assumptions based on things, and they're saying it's going to go that way, and you're just like, come on.
I mean, to give you an idea, I mean, where we're very active is also how to predict political elections. So to give you an idea, we have been able to analyze more than 20 million tweets within an hour, and we have been able, to predict Trump election, Brexit, U.S. House of Representatives, the results of the swing states. So it means behind that you have lots of pre-processing to clean data, especially to understand slang as well, how to detect a bot as well. So we have been pioneer in social media analytics. We have been pioneer in satellite data analytics, and we have been pioneer in macroeconomic nowcaster. So, we have all this learning curve that we have built up for more than 10 years too.
When you put the company together with this, as you were looking at the analysis that you do, was it an immediate gravitation towards the financial world or applications maybe towards government agencies?
No. Everything has been done for investment purpose because my background has been in investments. So in fact, we can say that we do macroeconomics for capital markets. It's about how to do macroeconomics to be ahead of market consensus. And at the end, when you have this information before everybody, our clients are at first, the largest global macro hedge funds. Now you have central banks, So, it was ECB, now it could be World Bank, IMF, etc. So we have created, in fact, also the standard in a macroeconomic nowcaster. And now, we want, that it could be used for retail, investors, and we are very happy, to collaborate with Bank of America, for this purpose, for this insurance market. We know it's a big market, and we want to provide this, the leading technology. It's military technology that is used now for economics and financial purpose.
So, and we'll come back. We definitely need to come back to the, how our world is intersecting. I've got two questions for you. So one, you mentioned politics. So if I give you guys a call, say maybe October, because our big election will be in November, you're going to have the answer for me?
In real time, too. Because what we have found out, everything could move in the, last month.
Sure.
And in fact, we have different types of modeling. One, the macro modeling, and on top of that, after you take account, the sentiment, of the population, and it could drive, the elections, especially at swing state level. Too.
I like it. Okay, so on a serious question, that was just kind of a. We'll talk sports gambling later and see if that plays into stuff, but. One of the things that we had this last year, so for financial advisors, I've seen this slide a million times where they would say they'll talk about inflation, and they would always show 20 years ago you could go to the movie theater for blank and now it costs this, or milk costs this amount, and you'd see the numbers, and I think most people, since we'd had such a long period of just steady inflation, low inflation, we would all kind of roll our eyes and like, yeah, big deal. And then all of a sudden, inflation, came like an avalanche down the mountain here. Did you see that? Were you able to judge it? How did that come into play? What was your experience with that?
And so, for inflation, we have been able to replicate how the Bureau of Labor Statistics compute inflation, but we have been able to computed in real time. For example, for the energy component, we track more than 15,000 gas stations in real time. For price of cars, price of F-150, more than 5 million prices a day. Now, having said that, we are able, to estimate each subcomponent of inflation. I mean, technically, it's inflation core services that the Fed is looking at. And we have been able to predict 100% of the case this year, either there is a hike or not hike ahead of the Fed, because we are able to compute it. For example, publicly in large of the largest global macro hedge funds, at the end of May of this year, the question was, do you expect any hike or not? And market break-even inflation expects some hikes. Consensus expects some hikes, but we have said we do not expect hike because we could see in real time the reversal of the inflation core services, what you call the sticky component part of inflation, and this is what the Fed is looking at. And in fact, there was no hike in June. After, we could see the bounce back of Chinese economic growth, which has an impact on energy component. And then we expected the hike after that there was. And after the slowdown of Chinese economic growth, and there was no hike anymore. So we got a 100% of success on how to predict hikes.
Have you seen any predictions that you've made, or any analysis you've made where a government agency has just been way off the mark, where you're just like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah, even I can tell you, the World Bank told us that we do even better statistics than even some countries that I'm not going to mention.
Let's mention them.
So especially for emerging, countries too. And, for example, you could see we have published with the World Bank, it was how to estimate the impact of COVID, on those countries. And using satellite data, ships, etc., we have been able, in fact, to estimate the economy of all those emerging countries all around the world.
Golly, it must be like you're watching the globe and almost like you've got a crystal ball, except you're just looking at what's actually happening at the moment. So what would be some of the key indicators for us to watch that also you look at? So as an everyday, not every day, but as a financial advisor who's new to Nowcasting, what are some key things that they should be watching?
I mean, the macroeconomic trend can evolve over time, but recently, I mean, the hottest topic was the inflation, of course. And recently, for the last 3 months, we've seen the inflation cooling down, especially the core parts. But when we see in real time the core part going down, we are not using a black box. We directly have the data. For instance, we know what has driven the core down. For instance, it has been for the core services the price of rents. For the core goods, it has been the prices of used cars. And I looked at the data this morning, and it's been really striking that prices at car dealers are completely down. And it weighs on inflation because it's a major component. So we can explain why, in fact, we have the inflation cooling down. And one important aspect is that we have that before the CPI release, which is at the middle of the month. We have that intra-month. So we can adapt the portfolio, we can adapt the signal intra-month without having to wait for the official data to be released.
What would be, so out of curiosity question, Long, is there any area that, as you think about the data when you look at it on a daily basis, there's the consumer sentiment and there's reality that you're seeing, like the mathematical, when you dial this all in, when you're Nowcasting? Are there any big areas where you see, the facts are this, but the consumers, the public thinks it's way over here? Like, there is anything that jumps to your mind that's like a big gap between reality and what people think?
I mean, unfortunately, what we believe is that consumers usually are lagging. It's like retail, investors, because on our side, it's like we can see already what's going on in the economy. But we can see that consumers are still very bullish. But we can see that it's not going to happen not that much. So I would say that probably we can see much faster than what usually the consumer or retail are seeing.
Is Nowcasting going to be the death of lagging indicators?
I mean, nowcasting is it enables to create leading indicators, basically. So it was the purpose of creating, information ahead of market consensus, and usually it's also always it's ahead of the retail investors, and it's about how to propose this kind of very advanced technology to a retail investor.
So let's talk about the retail investor. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing, how our worlds are intersecting today. So you're doing some work with Bank of America. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah. So we have a very strong, relationship with the Bank of America. We have worked, together, able, to build up a product. They build up, investment products. Mm-hmm. They know very well about QuantCube. The competitive edge of QuantCube against any, companies. I would say, and I believe that they have built up some very strong, investment product. And why? Because this kind of technology enables to estimate the current state of the economy and to anticipate reversal or inflection points mm-hmm. before market consensus. And whenever you know that, it's good, for asset allocation, about how, to minimize, for risk management, how to preserve capital, etc. too.
It's so interesting in the as it applies to the products that use Bank of America funds, Bank of America indices. It's fascinating through the years how, I guess maybe the right word would be nuanced, and how nuanced, I guess, how the old days of just having access to the S&P 500 in some of these retail products to now being able to have access to nowcasting in a safe money product is going to be fascinating. I'm still curious about a couple things. So how do things like natural disasters, like those acts of God, how do those impact nowcasting? How quickly can you pivot off something like that? Hurricane slams into the coast and...
I mean, hurricane, in fact, you can predict hurricane because, in fact, and we have done that. In fact, hurricane, it's a matter of how much heat you have between the ocean, basically. And when you have too much heat, and after you get, the hurricanes and, tornadoes. So this is, using AI now. In fact, you do better than what meteorologist people are, predicting. In fact, on that. So as well, geopolitical impacts. You can using this kind of text analytics, social. You can see the anxiety of people, in mm-hmm. real time all around, the world too.
So as you look at the current state, but then as you look at technology is expanding so rapidly, what technological advantages or advancements are you most excited about when it comes to nowcasting?
I mean, what I really like is about also satellite data. Mm-hmm. And in fact, now we have been even mandated to define the future sensors to put on satellites too.
Oh, wow.
So it creates some competitive edge. And also some data that I think are very powerful and that we have access to is telecom data. Telecom data, and we are GDPR compliant. But telecom data is not only about mobility, but it's about how much people consume through the phone. Let's say you go to, Starbucks, you pay with your phone. The telecom operator, knows about it. So, you can record the number, of transactions. Mm-hmm. You get access to bills. When the bill is rejected, it's going to tell you about the credit risk too, Or if you want, to estimate the business confidence, you can see the round trip of business travelers, between New York and Kansas City, for example. And if you have many, people doing a daily round trip, that business is doing good with Kansas City.
Is it a challenge to get that data, get access to that data? Because there's data that would be public, and then there's the private data. Is it all... are you mostly public, or are you have agreements to get like the Starbucks information?
Yeah, after you can get agreement and you can get, some exclusive, partnership, with a data provider. And I believe we are among the most advanced, not in, the world, on the financial world, to have access not only to some data you can buy, to some data you have partnership with the European Space Agency or with corporates too.
That's fascinating. So, Alex, what do you think are the big challenges coming up for nowcasting? What are anything you see?
I mean, the biggest challenge may be not where we think it is. It is in education, I think. Educating people in what is nowcasting, it's much more difficult than really doing nowcasting, because nowcasting is very fundamentally driven. As I said, we are going to only use the most advanced AI modeling to estimate some and analyze some data. That's the main point of nowcasting. But then we need to educate people to make them understand that it's not a black box, that it's not AI, because people are a bit afraid of AI. They've seen that they've seen that it has been proliferated, but not in a good sense. They don't really understand what's behind. So we really need to the challenge for us is to educate them, to try to make them understand that what we do and what we estimate is just the economy as it is. We are not going to discover really new thing. In fact, we use some basic principles such as the growth, the economic health of a countries, the inflation, the expected inflation, which is impacting the Fed policy, but we do it in real time. And for us, that will be the next challenge. We have started to do it. It works very well for hedge funds. We have do a transition from hedge fund to the retail, because I think that retail world also started to understand that they don't want to be left behind everybody. They want to benefit from this technology as well. So I think for us that will be the challenge for the next years.
How far is a person able to take the nowcasting and prognosticate into the future to make decisions? Is it, I mean, because you're looking at what's happening right now, how far can I plan out with nowcasting? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, in fact, using Nowcast, you can see you can expect what's going to happen, because, for example, if you look at economic growth, some countries are going to be leading compared to other countries. So if you are able, to see what's going on in one specific country, a leading country, you know exactly what's going to happen in the other country.
Yeah.
So this is how also, it is used, and how to make forecast for other countries too. Let me give you an example for the inflation. We could see that, Chinese economic growth using satellite data, we could see that it was slowing down very sharply. It means behind that you have less demand of energy, meaning that price of crude oil is going down, and it impacts the energy component of inflation. So we knew that inflation was going down way before anybody. It was like in September and October of this year.
That is awesome. I'm very excited to see your partnership with B of A and how that it's coming into fruition, and then for our advisors to be able to have access and take advantage of the benefits of nowcasting. Question for you: what about accuracy and validity?
I can give you, accuracy, because our clients at first, global macro hedge funds, and it is one question that they ask. What is your benchmark? Benchmark is official, data from Bureau of Labor of Statistics. To give you an example, in terms of correlation with the US GDP, which is published 3 months later, we have 95% of correlation.
Nice.
With inflation, 99% of correlation at level, and 90% what you call month-of-month variation. So we are able to see the variation of inflation 2 weeks ahead of the consensus with 89% of probability.
That's impressive. Everybody else gets to make a prediction based on what but make a prediction, and then if it doesn't come out, it's like, well, the market, oil changed, and it was, so that's why it didn't happen. But you guys have to be, you're almost actually really, your accuracy is probably more called into being validated than other people, because they can always explain it away. When you watch the talking heads on the stock shows, and they like, well, it didn't happen because of this, or things changed.
And this is the power of all those alternative data, because we can tell you exactly where does economic growth come from. Does it come from international trade? Does it come from employment, for inflation? And after, when you have that, it's going to explain, the choice of asset allocation, etc. too. So full, very transparent. And it's not about story. It's really factual.
Factual. So, Alex, a question for you. So you're at a party, and you're having a glass of wine, and someone asks what you do, and they say, hey, Alex, what's the most surprising bit of data you guys have been you're able to collect that really surprised you at how impactful it is? Is there anything like that? Anything that any random thing that you thought, well, that's interesting, and then it's like, wow, that's really informative, but you would never guess?
Maybe something very, very interesting that we have discovered is related to the Chinese GDP. So we have completely different data for China and for the US, for instance, and for Europe. And what we have found out is that using different data sets and computing the nowcasting of GDP of Europe and China, for instance, we have found out that Chinese GDP has a strong lead behavior compared to Europe, and by at least 30 days. And we are able to say it because we have daily data. If we rely on quarterly data, we cannot find this kind of relationship. So we need to go back to daily to compute the correlation, the league-lag correlation, to see that it's indeed the case that the Chinese GDP is leading European GDP by at least 30 days. So I think it was a huge discovery for us. And in terms of financial market as well, in terms of how the financial market and equity market cyclical assets are going to react from the Chinese GDP is also very, very interesting. And that's the same for the US. The US is also leading other GDP by at least 10 to 15 days as well.
So the ability, you must be able to give a more accurate view of what's going on, say, in a government or a country where they have tighter control of their information because of all the data you're collecting. Is that right or wrong? Like, say, with China, where maybe they have a little more control on the media. The analysis you all do must be just super important to so many people.
Yeah, this information we could see last week. Bloomberg has used our data on China. For example, because we have access, to data at city level, company level, industrial production, international trade, etc. And this is where you create value, where you don't have that much information. So, your competitive edge is about how to have information, how to create asymmetry of information, basically, when you get the information versus someone who doesn't have that much information. And this is how you create also competitive edge, and moreover in real time.
What excites you as you look at the future of nowcasting?
What excites me is that, every day you have more and more data. And, today, we have told you that we are able, to see that at country level. But tomorrow, and we started already to develop this technology, we are able to do it at city level asset level. You take a factory, name any big factory, we are able, you cross that with telecom data, you are able to estimate occupancy rate and the production. So today is about macro nowcast, but tomorrow is going to be earnings nowcast.
Oh, that's crazy. So soon, Alex, you're going to be able to tell me why I did what I did before I know what I did.
At least in real time.
So what excites you about the future with nowcasting?
The future of nowcasting is really trying to analyze new data sets. Long mentioned the telecom data, but we will also have new satellite data that have much more accuracy. You can basically see a table and charts and etc. So you have much more application to do. We have started to do everything related to macro, but we will move as well to commodities and we will move to equities. So we have plenty of nowcasting to do, for instance, to nowcast the earnings after nowcasting the GDP. And I think that will make the difference because we will be able to assess all the drivers for all the companies and then track exactly the data we need to track the cash flow of a given company with satellite, with consumer data, with other data. And I think that will be really the future for us.
How much do you, that's interesting what you just, I'm excited to see these things come to fruition. And you said something that maybe throw a question your way along. In developing, in parts of the developing world, how do you compensate for maybe some of the lack of data that you wouldn't have maybe as much? I mean, everybody has phones now for the most part, but it's not everybody. And so some of those areas, do you tend to focus more on the, I hate to say developed world and underdeveloped. I'm not sure what the right term would be, but in those areas where there's not the infrastructure.
Yeah, let me give you an example. You take one emerging country, and usually you're going to have industrial sector, you're going to have agriculture too, and you're going to get service. So let me give you some examples for each of there's not sector, but how we are able to track each of that. So I did not mention that in fact we are able, using combining satellite data and meteorological forecast, to estimate crop yield of corn, cocoa, wheat all around the world. So, the agricultural part, we do better estimation than USDA and the European Union as well, and moreover in real time. So this is the agricultural part. The industrial part, you use satellite data. In fact, what you measure, it is a density of NO2, which is a polluting gas issued by heavy industry sector. So you have industrial production, in real time. And about the service, let's say you travel, you can get hotels in Ouagadougou, which is a city, in Africa, basically. And in fact, you have a positive relationship between the price of the hotel room and the occupancy rate. You have a positive relationship between the number of commands and occupancy rate of restaurants. So this is after how you estimate also the service sector, hospitality, restaurants, car dealers. And at the end, this is how you estimate the economy of emerging market.
That is fascinating. That is fascinating. I look forward to watching where this all goes. I'm going to actually pay a whole heck of a lot more attention to Nowcasting. You guys have a newsletter or something? I might have to sign up here. Fascinating. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. This is fascinating. This is an area that a lot of advisors just haven't been exposed to yet. They're going to see this episode. They're going to have all kinds of questions. This will be fascinating to see how this is, how B of A applies this, and how we get access to this kind of opportunity for the end consumer. Fascinating. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for being on here. Now, what we should do, before I wrap the show, we should ask you to make some big predictions. I'm kidding. We won't do that to you. Make some predictions. We'll hold you to it. But anything we should watch as we go into the new year?
Prediction is about U.S. elections, so it's next year.
That's next year. That's just a train wreck anyway.
And before we were doing sports, because you have to say about sports.
Oh yeah, sports. Yes.
In fact, we were doing very good, but at the end, our investors ask us, "What are you doing? Financial markets or sports?" So we have to choose this one. But it works for sports as well.
So like an office betting league in your office probably wouldn't be any fun because you all would come up with the same answer, right? Because you just look at the stats and okay, well, France is going to win 2-1. I won't take that bet. All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for being here, for crossing the pond and hanging out with us. It was awesome. For everybody else, thank you for being here for this episode of The Complete Advisor. If you get a chance, don't forget to subscribe or follow, depending on what platform you're using, because that way you're notified anytime we drop a new episode. So, gentlemen, thanks for being here. Everybody else, have a great day.